Hello, board game brothers and sisters. I'm Adam Singer, and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every single week, going over all the upcoming campaigns. If you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about over the past week, except I really don't have much for you for this week. So instead, I'm just going to go over my recently backed Kickstarters and just let you know what I'm backing. Let me know if this is something you'd like me to do maybe once a month. Actually, I think I'm just going to upload this one as a separate video, and I'll do it at the same time as this video. So if you are interested to know what I backed and why, you can go ahead and check that out as well. I just don't want to mix too much into this weekly video because I spend too much time in these intros as it is, and this is a video about upcoming Kickstarters, so I just want to try and stick to that as much as possible. With that being said, I do work with Alex over at Boardgame Co. to keep track of all these upcoming campaigns, and if you are interested to see even more videos like this one, you definitely want to check out his channel because he puts up a video at the start of each month letting you know of the heavy hitters for that month. And he already does have his video up for July, so you can go ahead and check that out. And if you want to see even more upcoming games, definitely go ahead and check out Zilla Blitz because he posts a video each month going over the upcoming historical war games for that month. This is something that he focuses on almost exclusively, so if you are interested in historical war games, he has a lot more sources than I do when it comes to those, and there are a bunch of other platforms that he explores that I don't necessarily dive into. I'll have a link to both these channels in the description down below if you want to check them out, and of course feel free to subscribe if you do like their content, and feel free to subscribe to this channel as well if you haven't already. But like I said, this is a video about upcoming games, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on July 9th, and this one is called Prestige, a city building game. And this one is a semi-cooperative, asymmetrical card game where players are each going to be playing as different tribes. Each tribe has their own individual benefit, but they also have their own deck of cards representing the people in those tribes. And depending on the tribes that players are playing as, you're going to be taking all those decks and then shuffling them into a single communal deck. The reason that I say this is a semi-cooperative city building game is because players are all individually vying for the most influence, but you're also trying to build the city as a whole, and you're going to be defending against various threats. A really cool aspect of the way the communal deck works is that it's actually going to be split into 3 evenly sized decks, except for one of those decks is actually going to be put on the table face up. This means that anytime that it's your turn to draw a card, you can either draw blindly from either of the 2 decks, or if there is a card that you know you want already face up on that face up deck, you can just go ahead and grab that one instead. I really like this because it does give you some options when drawing a card, and even if the face-up card isn't one that you want, it might be one that you know another player really wants, and you might want to just take that so that they aren't able to get the benefits of that card. And there are ways to completely eliminate cards from the game. The way the game works is that each player has a hand of cards, and then on your turn, you can perform one of 4 possible actions. You can either just take one of your cards and then place it into the shared tableau representing your city. And what's neat about these cards is that they have different effects depending on the cards that you place them adjacent to. This is really cool because each of these cards have their own effects, but those effects can change quite a bit depending on the cards around it. If the card also matches your tribe's color, then that's also going to be helping you gain more influence for the end of the game because the player who has the most cards of their color out in the tableau at the end is going to be the one with the most influence. But rather than playing a card, you can just choose to activate one of the cards already in play, and you'll be able to perform the unique actions shown on that card. But as I mentioned, there are ways to permanently eliminate cards from the game, and that is one of the options to discard 1 or more cards from your hand. And this is nice if there aren't any cards that you really want to play, or if you just want to eliminate them completely for the other players. But whenever you do this, you are going to be attracting invaders into the city, which can actually cause all sorts of damage and potentially lose the game for everyone. And this is where the 4th action comes into play, because you can actually spend an action in order to repair buildings that were previously damaged by those invaders or some other events that may have happened in the game. But one important detail that I didn't mention that happens at the start of your turn is that you're going to be checking the current state of the city and then drawing an event depending on what that state is. If the city's doing great and everyone's happy, then you're going to be drawing a positive event card, which will have positive effects on your city and on you as the player. But if the opposite is true, then you're going to be drawing a negative event card, which can have all sorts of negative effects. You're also going to be checking if an invader card needs to be drawn, which, like I said, depends on whether or not players are discarding cards from their hand. And like I said, these can damage your city or harm your population or resources in various ways. But you really don't want to be drawing these invader or negative event cards too often, because if either of those decks is completely depleted, then all the players lose the game. And you do also lose the game if your city completely runs out of its population, because a city isn't much of a city if there's no one there to live in it. But if you're able to keep your city happy and you're drawing those positive event cards, then the game's going to end as soon as that deck completely runs out. And then it's the player who has the most prestige who wins the game, which is the player with the most of their card type out in that tableau. And if you want to learn more about this game, I will have it linked down below. And of course, you can follow along to get notified once it launches. And also launching on the 9th, we have Historica, Arcanum, Cults of London. And this one is an asymmetrical deck builder and area control game set in London during the Victorian era. Players are going to be taking on the roles of secret factions vying for control over London's arcane society by conducting rituals, slaying eldritch horrors, and plotting assassinations. The game offers a few different modes of play, but the way that you're going to be playing this game is that you're going to be drawing a hand of operators, with each of them having expertise and different skills that will help you with different challenges, but then also having different strengths which will help you in combat. Players also have faction-specific action cards, and on your turn you can play one of your operators either to one of your action cards or to one of the many locations in order to gather resources, eliminate enemies, or attempt to discover more about the various missions, which you'll also be trying to complete in order to potentially win the game. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of info on how this game plays at the time of me filming this video, but they do have the flow of the game outlined on their campaign page. It says that players are going to be going through a bunch of different phases, with the first one allowing you to prepare your operations and plot for the Black Knight. Then you'll be revealing your enemy's intentions by paying a cost, rearranging your missions guided by the new intel that you've acquired. And then once you've all revealed your operator cards, the unfriendly ones are actually going to be going into a battle with each other, with only one coming out alive. The survivor of that, along with the peaceful operators, will then be able to go and conduct their missions. Then there's going to be an anomaly phase where different eldritch horrors are going to be making their way into play and causing all sorts of grief for the players, although some of the players might prefer to have them there. The game continues like this over a series of rounds, and I assume you're going to be getting your victory points from completing those missions, and the player that does that the best will win the game. But if you want a more accurate description of this game, definitely check out the campaign, and I will have it linked in the description down below. Also launch on July 9th, we have the next campaign coming from Chip Theory Games, and this one is for a new edition of 20 Strong, and this one is called 20 Strong Tanglewoods. And if you're not already familiar with 20 Strong, this is a solo dice rolling game system with a set of core rules and components in the core box, but then you'll be able to mix it with different decks in order to add additional components and rules into the game. And one thing I do want to say about this new iteration on the system is that I'm really impressed with how much this actually does change the game. 20 Strong Tanglewoods is not only a new set of decks that you'll be able to add into that system, but they are almost their own complete game. I'll explain how the core system plays in a second here, but first I'll just let you know of a few of the details that are going to be changing with this one, because in this one, you don't actually start with all your dice, and there's also going to be a merchant deck that's introduced into the game. And whenever you gain access to that merchant, it's going to allow you to buy new dice that you didn't already start with, potentially buy dice back that you've exhausted, or even buy different items that you'll be able to use throughout your game. But the coolest change with this new system is the addition of the path cards, because you're going to be moving through these various cards as you play the game, stopping on different locations, and each location is going to have a different icon associated with it, which is going to determine whether you're going to fight an enemy, have some sort of encounter event, heal or recover dice, or, like I said, visit that merchant. The different icons can also have different types of borders around them, which also modify the effect of that location, adding a little variety even if it does have the same icon. If you've ever played the game Slay the Spire, you're probably familiar with this concept. Another cool change with this system is that you're always going to be fighting the next enemy at the top of the enemy deck. The neat thing about this is that unlike the previous editions of 20 Strong, your tactics skill does not let you go through the combat phase multiple times. Instead, it's going to be allowing you to peek a little bit into the future, and depending on what your tactic value is, you'll be able to draw that many cards and create a queue in order to see which enemies are upcoming. And as you might have already noticed, Tanglewoods is set in a fairy tale world. And there's also going to be 3 new boxes that are introduced into the game with red, white, and gold. Red allows you to play as Little Red Riding Hood going up against the Big Bad Wolf as the final boss, and you will also be able to fight against his wolf pack as well. And I'll just give you a little bit more insight onto how this specific box plays, because the more of those wolf pack members that you're able to beat before you reach the big bad wolf, the weaker the wolf will be when you get there, because you don't actually have to fight every single enemy that you come across, because there are ways that you can avoid or move around them. And for every member of the wolf pack that you don't beat, it's going to be adding a special ability to the big bad wolf at the end of the game, making that wolf a bit stronger. But then the white box is, of course, Snow White, where you're going to be going up against the Evil Witch. And then finally, we have the gold box, which is Goldilocks, and you're going to be going against those 3 Hungry Bears. But like I said, this is based on a core system that already has 3 boxes released for it. There's Solar Sentinels, where you're going to be fighting different aliens in space, Hoplomachus Victorium, which is based on the Gladiator series of games that Chip Theory Games offers, and then Too Many Bones, which is based on their Too Many Bones series. And just like the 3 Tanglewood boxes play very similar to each other with a few small tweaks, this is the same case for the 3 original boxes. But if you're not familiar with the core rule set, this is a game where you're essentially going to be choosing a hero at the start of the game, and there's a bunch of different heroes that you can choose from, and each of them have 3 different stats as well as a special ability. The first one is your health, and this is how much hit points you can take before you lose the game. Then there's your tactics, which I will come back to in a second here, but it essentially lets you attack the enemies that many times during your turn. And then there is your redraw stat, which lets you unexhaust that many dice at the end of a battle. The neat thing about these stats is that these are just your starting stats, and there are different effects and cards that you can gain in order to modify these and even raise them up quite a bit by the end of the game. And this is called 20 strong because there are 20 dice that you're going to be using, and the remaining 17 dice are all going to be used for combat, with each of the colors representing a different probability of landing a certain amount of hits. The empty circles are a miss, but then you can also land a hit which will do 1 point of damage, and then there are the critical hits which will do 2 points of damage. And this is where things get very different from Tanglewoods, because in the original version of this game, you're going to have 3 decks of enemy cards, and then you're going to be choosing 1 to engage with for that round. Each of the enemies can have different effects, and they can also cause you to draw even more cards that you have to face within that round, which means that you're not always just fighting 1 enemy at a time. But you're going to be choosing any combination of your dice, and then you're going to be rolling them and then applying hits to the enemies however you see fit. If your strategy stat is more than 1, then you can do this again, adding any additional dice into your pool, and then re-rolling any of the dice that you didn't already assign to the enemies. You're going to be gaining rewards for any of the enemies that you were able to defeat, often triggering some sort of effect or gaining you items or abilities. The problem here is that any dice that you use are going to be going into the exhausted pile, and you're only going to be able to get those back by using your stat or by using special effects that you might find across these different cards. The game continues like this until you either lose all your health, and at that point you lose the game, or if you finally get through that deck of cards and defeat the final boss. I have played the original 20 Strong, and I do think it's a really solid solo game. It's not one that I played too often, but I think Tanglewoods does take it to the next level, and it looks way more interesting to me than the original editions of the game. But if you're already a fan of this one, I think this is going to be a no-brainer, and if you're not originally a fan of the original series, I think you'll definitely still want to check this one out because of all the new concepts it brings to the table. But as always, you can find a link to this in the description down below if you want to check it out, and of course, you can follow along to get notified once it launches. Also launching on July 9th, we have the rolling board game bags and artist illustrated playmats, and I don't think I need to spend too much time on this one because I've pretty much explained it all to you just by reading the title there. This is essentially going to be offering you a new style of board game bag that's going to have wheels on it, just like you'd see on those luggage bags at the airport. These bags are really nice, so if you do want a high quality board game bag, this is definitely a good option. But then this campaign is also going to be offering artist illustrated playmats from famous artists in the board game community. So I don't have an exact list of which artists will be providing artwork here, but the one I'm seeing here does look like Kwanchai Moria, so you'll probably see some artwork from him. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see artwork from Beth Sobel, Vincent Dutrait, and many other famous artists in the industry. But if you do want to check this one out, you can definitely find it down below and click to get notified once it launches. And also launching on July 9th, we have Sirens: The Deep Sea, and this one is a cooperative scenario-based game where players are going to be playing as sirens with their own asymmetrical powers and upgrade board as you try to complete your scenario objectives. You might be doing things like restoring the ocean floor, constructing buildings, and fighting off different monsters and bosses. On a turn, players are going to be using their action points to move around the board and perform their actions, which could be to gather resources, construct equipment with those resources, or attack enemies out on the board by using dice rolling, adding those results to your stats, and then comparing that to the defense value of your enemy. This is how you deal damage, but of course the enemy can do this right back at you, and if you do run out of health in this game, you're not completely eliminated from the game. Instead, you just spawn at a new location with half of your health, but this can also come with some additional side effects depending on the scenario. You can also use your action points to complete scenario-specific actions that are required in order to win that scenario, or even to repair or build buildings out on the board. And what's really cool about this is that the buildings each have a different effect. They might allow you to pay for skill upgrades in order to upgrade your skill tree, or you might choose to build a particular building beside a certain resource because it's going to allow you to transform those resources into new items. Movement's really interesting in this game. You might have noticed that this does offer a 3D board with different elevations that you can move in and out of, and it does cost you more in order to move through those locations. Luckily, there are underwater currents that are going to be changing throughout the game, and you can use this to your advantage in order to boost your movement to make moving through those locations a little bit easier. But after all the players have performed their actions, you're going to be moving into the enemy activation phase. We're going to be activating each of the enemies currently out on the board, and they're going to be trying to attack and destroy the buildings as well as the players to try and set you back in your objectives. After that, either at the end of a round or based on some sort of triggering event, you're going to be advancing the scenario's progress, which can also trigger all sorts of different events to occur and modify the board and the goals that players are trying to achieve. But the game continues like this until the players either trigger one of the loss conditions, and in that case they lose the game, but if they're able to complete all the objectives of their scenario, then they'll be able to advance to the next one. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. And also launching on July 9th, we have Pandora Celeste, and this one is a game that's inspired by movies like Aliens, where players are going to be going up against an alien threat on their ship. But what makes this one really interesting is that the ship has also entered into its emergency protocol routine, and this is all designed to protect the ship from the enemies, not the players. So if the players allow this sequence of events to continue, the ship is actually going to be wiping out everything on it, including the players. So not only are players trying to defeat their threats, they're also trying to shut down the protocol before it eliminates them as well. Another really unique feature of this game is that it actually also has an unfoldable box that you're going to be using in order to play the game, because you're just going to be unfolding this box in order to set up the main board. And the box does have an insert in it to hold all the cards and components, but you are actually going to be using that insert in the game as well, because there's going to be different ledges on the edges of the inserts, and the insert represents the different ventilation systems offered in the ship, and players will be able to crawl through those by moving their characters across those different ledges, which will allow them to navigate to the ship and get to areas that aren't so easy to get to, or even try to sneak past some of those aliens. This is a game that offers a few different scenarios that all work a little bit differently from each other, and there's also a bunch of different protocols that players can play to go through a different sequence with that onboard computer. Each player has their own deck of action cards specific to that character, and players are going to be taking turns just playing one action card at a time until a player passes. And then once a single player passes, then all the remaining players can go once more, but they'll be able to play 2 cards at a time for that final turn. The actions might allow you to move different distances across the board, interact with the ship, opening and closing doors, or interacting with different computers, interacting with the other players, and of course fighting the various enemies. Moving into a room with tokens allows you to perform an action to reveal those tokens, and these tokens could sometimes be alien threats that you'll then have to bring onto the board, or they could be additional action cards or items that you can include with your character. But once all the players have performed their actions, there's going to be certain security doors that are always going to be locking shut at the end of your turn. This can be a good thing because they do offer some protection against the aliens, although aliens can deal damage to the various doors. But if they do that to get into a room where you're at, they're going to be exhausted from breaking down that door, and they're not going to attack you right away. But the aliens do all get an activation after the player's turns, and each alien can move in a different way, or even not at all, and this is all going to be outlined on that alien's card. But you're also going to be drawing an additional card to indicate what actions that alien is going to perform during its activation. This could cause it to get additional movement or have different effects, or of course attack other players or creatures in that room. The actions players performed all generate a certain amount of noise, so anytime that an alien's targeting a certain player, if there's multiple players it could potentially hit, it's always going to be attacking the player that was the noisiest. Whenever you're attacked by an alien, you're going to be drawing another alien card, and each of these cards will also indicate whether it's a hit or a miss. And if it's a hit, it's going to be dealing damage to you, which will cause you to discard one of your action cards, and this is essentially your health for the game. But this also gives you an opportunity to push your luck because you can also choose to draw an additional alien card, and if that's a miss, then the entire attack is a miss. But if it's a hit, then you're going to be taking 2 points of damage. The game continues like this, alternating between the player's turns and the alien's turns, and of course with players trying to prevent the computer from advancing through its protocol, but each time you're able to stop the protocol from completing its next event, that will actually cause another alien to make its way into the ship. There's going to be lots going on here as players try to survive, and if that sounds like fun to you, you can definitely check this one out, and I will have it linked in the description down below. And launch on July 10th, we have the next campaign offered from CMON, and this one is called DC Heroes United. And this one is the next edition in the United system, which, if you're not familiar with, they have already released a ton of content for, but it was all in the Marvel Universe. This new edition is going to be playing very similar to the Marvel United version of this game, but it is also going to include some of the existing improvements that they've made to that game since then, with the starting cards for each of the characters that they introduced with the X-Men expansion. And then also this is going to include the equipment cards that they included in the Marvel United multiverse. So essentially this DC version of the game is going to be iterating on everything that they've already added to this game. Of course, this is going to include all sorts of new characters and villains, each bringing in their own twists into the game. But this is going to be adding one big change into the game, and that's the addition of new card types. When you're playing as one of the heroes in this game, you might notice that some of your cards have a yellow backdrop, and these ones offer you one-time use abilities that actually aren't used on the turn that you play the card, but you're able to use those on a future turn. So this is another interesting way that players can incorporate previously played cards into their turn. But like I said, those are one-time use, so once they're used, you're going to be flipping those over to the other side. But similar to this, some of the characters will also have cards with a green backdrop, and if you're able to get one of those into play, then those are going to be offering you ongoing effects for the entirety of the time that they are in play. What's cool about this is that just offering these two new types of cards creates all sorts of new combo opportunities that weren't previously possible, and to augment this, you're going to find that a lot more of your heroes' cards are going to have special abilities associated with them in order to facilitate that comboing. This is a small difference from Marvel United, where most of the cards just had icons and not a whole lot of text for special abilities. That's pretty much the main differences with this game. Otherwise, it does play very similar to the Marvel United version of this game, but if you're not familiar with how that plays, I did cover it in the past, as well as the Marvel United multiverse campaign, so I'll just roll that footage for you now so you can get an idea on how the game actually plays, and then just keep in mind the small changes that this edition makes. Of course, you can find a link to this in the description below if you do want to learn more, or if you want to check it out or follow along before the campaign launches in order to get that free gift added to your pledge. And if you haven't played this game before, you're going to be putting together a team of 4 heroes, randomizing a bunch of location tiles where you'll be able to perform different actions, and then you're also going to be choosing an enemy and that enemy's master plan. And you'll be able to mix and match all of these to create almost an endless amount of different scenarios. But what this is going to be adding new to the game is all sorts of different villains across the entire multiverse, as well as different heroes that players will be able to incorporate into their Marvel United experience. But this isn't just an expansion on characters, because you'll also be able to include the newly added equipment cards, which either start with your character at the start of the game or you'll acquire throughout the game, which will allow you to feel more like the character that you're playing in the game, because if you're playing as one of the many Spider-Mans, you'll be able to use your web slinger, or if you are playing as one of the many Thors, you'll be able to throw your hammer. There's also an improved solo mode added to the game where you can play as a single character, and then the other characters are acting more as a support role, so you don't have to control all the characters individually. But of course, when expanding into the multiverse, there's going to be some pretty epic opponents, and this expansion will include Galactus into the game, as well as his 4 heralds. And these 4 heralds can be played with Galactus or played individually as their own enemies. The interesting thing about playing with Galactus is that he's not going to jump around the different tiles out on the board. Instead, he's going to be remaining in the center of the board, rotating and influencing the locations that he's looking at. And if you're a fan of the many miniatures from the previous campaigns and how they incorporated the fire, water, and ice effects into the miniatures by using that clear resin, there are going to be more miniatures introduced featuring those really cool effects, and of course these 4 heralds are one of them. One other thing I wanted to mention, because if you are interested in this campaign, you're probably going to be interested in this, and that's that they're also going to be releasing a Spider-Geddon set that's going to be going straight to retail, so this won't be available in the campaign, but you can look forward to it coming out sometime this year to your local retailer. And that's pretty much everything I have for you regarding this campaign, but if you want to know more about how it plays or some of the previous offerings, I did cover this back when they did their X-Men campaign, and I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. Players must complete 2 out of the 3 missions before they can attack the villain, and each villain plays very different from each other and has their own master plan deck that wins them the game if it's ever completed. Players will each play their own hero with their own hero deck, and on their turn they get to play a card which allows them to perform actions based on the icons visible on the card they played and the card that was played by the player before them. This adds another neat layer of cooperation since the card you play will affect the player after you. The Marvel United X-Men makes a few changes to the game. First, it increases the player count by making the villain a playable character. This change also introduces the supervillain and superhero cards, which each have their own trigger conditions and can interfere with other players' turns. Anti-hero characters are also being added to the game, which come with both their own villain master plan deck and a hero deck. We've seen this before with Venom in the previous release, but it looks like CMON wanted to expand on this idea, and they're now going to be focusing on adding a lot more characters that have that ability. Also launched on July 10th, we have the Fantasy Map Maker, and with a name like that, it doesn't sound like much of a game, but this one is actually a roll and write, and it actually looks like quite a lot of fun. And as you might expect, the goal in this game is to draw your own map, but each player is going to have their own set of private objectives that they're going for. And this is going to dictate which sort of features you want in certain configurations. If you're able to meet those requirements at the end of the game, then you're going to be earning those victory points and hopefully winning the game, but at the very least, you'll have a really cool map. The way this game works is that 2 dice are going to be rolled each and every round, and players are each going to be simultaneously choosing one of those dice to select a region in this circle here, with each of those regions having a selection of different features, and then you're going to be using the other dice's value to put into the circle on one of those features. The value you put there essentially means how many times you're going to be drawing that feature out on your map according to its placement rules. This image has a completed map, but of course when you start, this is going to be completely empty, and any spaces that are empty out on your map are considered unexplored, and in order to explore them, you're going to be wanting to draw your large features out on the map, and the large features are the mountains and forests, and whenever you draw them, you're going to be drawing them along the lines of the grid. An alternative way that you can explore more areas of your map is by drawing out the long features, and these are coastlines, rivers, and roads that are going to be drawn through the rows and columns of the map. But once you've drawn out a portion of your map, you'll then be able to assign dice to the various action spaces that allow you to draw these small features. And these are going to be things like houses, streams, lakes, and islands. You're going to be drawing these anywhere that you have already explored out in your grid. There's also different locations that will let you draw labels out on the map, allowing you to name the various features and locations. But then there's also an action location that allows you to draw various landmarks, and this one is a bit of a special one because each landmark is unique in the game, and it can be different castles, outposts, ruins, and ships, and each of these is going to be associated with their own card. When you perform this action, the value doesn't allow you to draw multiple of these. Instead, you're always going to be drawing one, but it must be in the row or column, matching the value that you assign to that space. Each of these cards will have their own effects and placement rules that you'll have to follow, and they could also score you additional victory points at the end of the game. And finally, the last thing you can draw out on your map are the events, which are drawn anytime that doubles are rolled, and each of the cards are going to be associated with a particular value, and each of these events will have their own effects on your map, and also their own placement rules, just like how the landmarks work. These are going to be all sorts of different features and creatures that will add more variety to your map and possibly a little bit of danger. The game continues like this until you roll 2 dice that you're no longer able to do anything with because you've occupied all those action possibilities. And then your game's going to come to an end, and you're going to be adding up your victory points from the map that you drew and the various quests that you're trying to complete. And then the player with the most victory points wins. And if you're interested to check this one out, it does sound really cool, and you can find a link to it in the description down below. And also launch on the 10th, we have Agape, a game about love, and this is a game where players are going to be trying to match lovers with their hand with a lover out on the table to try and meet the requirements that they are looking for in order to score victory points at the end of the game. The way this game works is that you're going to have 3 lover cards dealt to each of the players. And each of these cards are going to have a different height, gender, hair color, and age. But then there's always going to be 1 lover card revealed out on the table, and then 3 interest cards which represent what they're looking for in a potential lover. On your turn, you're going to be playing 1 of the cards from your hand, trying to fulfill as many of those interest cards as you can, because that's going to be earning you victory points for the end of the game. But with each interest card that you're able to fulfill, you'll have the option of activating just 1 of the special abilities on any of those cards. Whenever you make a successful pairing, you're going to be taking that couple into your supply face down, and the player that has the most of these at the end of the game is going to be getting some additional victory points, but some of these abilities will allow you to flip some of those cards face up, which will make each of those face up cards a guaranteed victory point. Of course, there's a bunch of other effects as well, but at the end of your turn, you're just going to be drawing a new card into your hand so that you always do have a hand of 3. But each of these cards also has a true love symbol located in the top left corner of the card, and if an opponent plays a card with a true love symbol that matches a card in your hand, you can actually play your card out of turn, coupling it with that card they just played, and then taking those into your supply, but your opponent will still get to take their action as well as the other character that they paired with. The game continues like this until the deck runs out, and then the player with the most victory points at the end wins the game. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And launching on July 12th, we have Wacky Puppies, the Not Safe for Work edition, and this is a campaign that I already did cover in the past, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. This is a party game where the goal of the game is to not hold both a bomb and a detonator at the same time. If that ever happens, then you explode and you are eliminated from the game. And of course, there will be a bunch of ability cards that players can use to help themselves or harm their opponents. And there will be cards that will allow you to delay explosions, escape from them, disarm, or even deflect them to other players. And a neat layer on top of this is that you can actually collect sets of cards for some even more powerful abilities. Negotiation is allowed in this game, so you can form alliances whenever it suits you, but you are never actually held to any agreements, so if you're banking on a future favor from another player, keep in mind that they can backstab you anytime that they like. Adding to the party element, the game does also offer a bunch of different challenge cards in the deck. And these will have players doing different mini-games like staring contests or thumb wars or things like that, and of course you will be rewarded or punished depending on whether you win or lose those challenges. Like I said, this version is going to be a not safe for work version of the game, so if you're looking to get a little filthy while you play this one, this is the version you want to get. That's it for this week, but don't leave yet because we still got an awesome giveaway to announce, and this one's going to be offered anywhere in North America as well as in the EU or the UK, and this one is for a pledge for Zoo Tycoon, the board game, The New Shores, which will include the core game as well as this new expansion. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is a game where players are going to be building up their own zoo, and as you're adding new creatures into your zoo, you're going to be raising your popularity, your education, and your conservation stats. The reason this is important is because whichever is the lowest of the 3 at the end of the game is going to be determining your victory points for the game. This game has a bunch of animals, and what I love about this is that each one does come with its own animeeples that will represent those animals. And these are some of the best animal meeples that I've seen in a game. And this new expansion is going to be adding new creatures from the North and South Pole, as well as Australia. There's also going to be a new feature that you can add into your zoo where you'll be able to house different animals in an indoor facility. So there will be certain animals that will meet that criteria that you'll be able to include in your zoo in a new way. Like I said, this one's for the base game and the new expansion. All you gotta do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below with the hashtag zoo. And you can say anything you want, but if you're looking for something in particular, maybe you could let us know what your favorite animal is. For myself, it's always been a wolf, which is kind of surprising because I'm more of a cat person, but the tiger's a close second. Good luck in the giveaway, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners from last week, and we had a pledge for yield as well as a pledge for peak. So I'm going to be drawing for yield first, and to draw a winner, I'll use this fancy application here. All these extra names are bonus entries for my supporters over on Ko-fi, and if you like this content, you want to help support this channel, make it a little bit more sustainable. I am independent. I don't take any support from publishers, so if you do have the means to do so, I do appreciate it. But let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner of yield is... I still don't know how to say this, so Rec, you are the winner. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won a pretty sweet pledge here. Thanks for all the support and for the help on the Discord. Now let's go ahead and draw the winner for peaks. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. Draw another winner. And the winner is PDA Photo, who is another member over on Ko-fi. Congratulations on the win. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge. Thanks for the support, and for everyone else who didn't win, thanks for entering. There still will be a lot more chances to enter in on these giveaways. And I still do appreciate your comments, and I will read them all. I do just have a bit of catching up to do. And that's everything I have for you this week, and I did try to talk a little bit slower in this video just because of some feedback I've been seeing in the comments, so thanks so much for letting me know. I'm always happy to hear some criticisms. I hope that it was an improvement and I wasn't talking too slow, but feel free to throw any additional criticisms my way. I'm always happy to try and improve. I still do struggle with this thing, even after doing it for 4 years, but I'm just happy to get this info out for anyone that's interested, and if I can do that even better, then I do want to try and do that. But as always, thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.
Oh.